Welcome, everyone. This is Glenda Dawson, and you're watching the Paranormal Dolls. My co host, Sarah Garcia, Moongirl, couldn't make it today. She is traveling and taking care of previous commitment. And, just want to say hi to Sarah and hope you're having fun. And today, I just wanted to mention that we are grateful that you are following us and you are watching this show week after week, and all of the comments and all of the stuff that you email us, we appreciate. And we have a phenomenal guest. He's one of the pillars of the paranormal field, and um, well, let him introduce himself. And Keith Johnson, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you. And my name is Keith Johnson, and I have been into the field of the paranormal research for quite a few years, actually, and decades. I've been in the field of paranormal research since I was a teenager, and that led to me doing interventions on people's behalf who may be having problems with the paranormal, who are experiencing situations that make them very, very uncomfortable. And that's anything from they think they've got an unwanted visitor in the house, their privacy is being invaded, to actual assaults on people and something trying to attach itself, and maybe even worse, trying to get inside a person. So there's a, a wide gambit of that I do deal with in situations, and it's a reality. The paranormal is a reality, whether some people want to believe it or not, and those who refuse to believe it have never been touched by it. So I've had people say to me, "Oh, let me see you prove it. Let me see you prove it." And trust me, you don't really want me to prove it. You really don't. You really don't. But yes, I've been doing interventions for many, many years. I worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren years ago. I was very, very good friends with them, and God rest their souls. And we certainly remember them.
Yes, we do.
And I was a member of the Atlantic Paranormal Society and a cast member of Ghost Hunters. My brother Carl and I were both cast members. And Sandra, my wife Sandra, and I also formed our own organization near New England Anomalies Research. And we do interventions. We have a wonderful, wonderful team. We love our team members. And basically, that's what we do. I mean, it's not a living that we get paid for, but it's something we have been doing for many, many years. And our team members do assist us in that as well. And we have our own show, which is called Ghosts Are Near, GHOSTS, letter RNEAR. And that is on local public access, and it's also on YouTube. So that's, I'm pretty much out there, you could say. You
Mhm.
could find me if you want.
Well, that must have been really interesting and hard to do in the very beginning, uh,
Oh, yeah.
because nobody wanted to talk about it, and if they did, if you did talk about it, you might be considered, a little crazy or
Hmm.
out there, or whatever. So, we are all thankful that you were one of the people who have decided to be out there, to open up, to talk about it. And in the very beginning, like I said, a lot of people experience things, but they never really went out into the public and opened up all the avenues that needed to for the rest of the
Hmm.
paranormal field to really blossom. Now, speaking of the Warrens, you have an event coming soon, I believe, right?
Yes, yes, it's this coming weekend actually, and it's something they've been preparing for all year long. It's put on by NESPR, New England Society of Psychic Research, and
Hmm.
that organization was actually founded in 1952 by Ed and Lorraine,
Hmm.
and now their son-in-law Tony Spera, he's in charge of it, and also Dan Rivera, his main investigator. They're basically in charge of setting it up and everything, and it's called the Warren Seekers of the Supernatural Phantasmacon.
Mhm.
long title, but yes, the Phantasmacon, we refer to it, and it's being held at Mohegan Sun again this year. So we're very glad to be there. We have a even larger rooms for the lectures and the public speakers there, and it's going on Friday and Saturday, the 27th and the 28th. Now, on Friday evening, there will be a VIP party. That's when it all starts and kicks off. So Friday evening is the VIP party starting at 6. I'm sorry, starting at 7 p.m. Starting at 7 p.m. and commencing to 11 p.m. Now, the first hour, you'll have somebody very interesting, and that's David Merlin, who is the paranormalist, and he will be astounding people with his wonders. And then the rest of the VIP party, you get to meet and greet with a lot of paranormal celebrities. I have a lot of friends that will be there as well, and we're looking forward to the VIP party. And then the actual convention is, of course, Saturday, and that starts at doors open pretty much. Well, they open. The actual event starts at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. People are filtering through and such, and
Mhm.
you'll see a lot of vendors, a lot of people selling books, making public appearances, and we also I'll be there. Of course, Sandra and I will be there, and my brother Carl will be there, and there'll also be a number of speakers throughout the day, and that's very interesting. I highly encourage people to come and see the speakers. Jason Hawes, the founder
Mhm.
of TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, we go, of course, way back. He'll be speaking there. He'll be doing a Q&A. He'll be taking questions. So whatever somebody wants to ask, I guess within reason, you can ask. And Jason will be very glad to answer your questions. And also, Ronnie LeBlanc will be there, and he's a Bigfoot expert. He's done many adventures trying to track and find proof of Bigfoot, which he has. He has
Mhm.
found a lot of proof there. He's the star of Travel Channel's Expedition Bigfoot and is featured on Paranormal Caught on Camera and Conjuring Kesha as well. So please, by all means, listen to his talk. And as I just mentioned, Tony Sper and Dan Rivera, they'll be speaking as well. They'll be
Nice.
speaking, and it can accommodate a lot of people, but try to get there as early as possible if you want to hear the speakers, because there's a lot of seating, but it does eventually run out because it's
Mhm.
very, very, very popular. This convention gets more popular every year, and more speakers will be announced. Um, and one of the people there recently, I found out that Steve Gonzalez, a good friend, Steve Gonzalez, is
Yes.
going to be there. And a lot of people, if you watch Ghost Hunters and Ghost Nations and those shows, you'll be familiar with Steve Gonzalez. He usually teams up with our friend Dave Tango, and they're
Mhm.
kind of like a serious investigator slash comedy duo when they get together. It's funny because I mean, Steve does have his things that he can't abide, such as he's got arachnophobia, which a lot of people do deal with, and of course, if you're doing paranormal investigation in old buildings and houses, you're going to meet up with vermin here and there. You're going to meet
Right.
up with critters, not just spirits. You're going to meet up with critters, and that's just one of the things you deal with. But Steve does deal with it pretty good. And I remember when we first met Steve, he was actually New England Paranormal, and he was a TAPS affiliate.
Mm.
And he was coming into these cases. He had one particular case that was more than just an average haunting, so to speak. He felt it was something very dark and maybe sinister, and probably of the inhuman spirit variety.
Mhm.
So he asked Jason, "Do you have anybody that deals with this?" So that's how I met Steve. Jason recommended
Nice.
me and introduced me to Steve, and that's how we started working together. And Steve was fascinated when Jason and I told him about a case we had done in Skohegan, Maine, that was very, very unnerving, very frightening, and it was non-human spirits, evil spirits as well. So Steve was fascinated to hear about that and to hear about us, knowing and working with Ed and Lorraine Warren, which we both did. Jason and I both did years past,
Mhm.
and so even years down the road, Steve and when Sandra became involved, we'd be there like at least once a month or every other month. Steve would call us, contact us. I've got another case. Can you make it? So we'd be there like once every month or once every other month if Steve came, down with a really kind of heavy paranormal case. So Sandra and I would come in and assist, and so we have good memories there as well. But a lot of good people. As just there's just so many to think of and name. But if you go on the site, you go to NESPR, look on their site, or you research the Warren Seekers of the Supernatural, Phantasmacon. You'll
Right.
get all the information, and it will tell who's speaking and when. And so the information should be there. So I do hope to see a lot of people there. Please stop by our table and say hello to my brother and I and to Sandra. And we'll be very, very glad to see you. And I'll have my books there as well. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what's going on this weekend. It's a busy October. It's always busy, as you
Yes.
well know. Anybody in this field that gets very, very involved. October is it's like Christmas is to most people. It's just
Yes.
the day and day, and you by the grace of God, you survive it and
Right.
live
Yep.
to investigate another day.
Exactly. Yes. Well, it's because, that veil does thin or disappear completely.
Hmm.
So spirits are able to appear and communicate and go from one dimension to another. And it's
Yeah,
just,
I'm glad you said that because it is very interdimensional that spirits
mhm,
do travel from one dimension to another, which years ago people don't still totally understand that, but now there is kind of a grasp on that there is more than the dimensions that we're familiar with, and that there are entities that can be paraphysical and
mhm,
can travel from one dimension into another. And some people claim that may be an explanation for the Sasquatch or Bigfoot population, that they can be interdimensional, transdimensional,
mhm,
that sometimes you don't find them a lot, and you see them and they're gone. Well, some believe they're subterranean. Also, there's the theory that they do pass between dimensions, so that could be an explanation for that as well.
mhm, mhm. Well, anybody who believes we're the only ones around,
Hmm.
they have to go and research a little more. That's
Yes,
all I can
yes,
say.
indeed.
So,
Hmm.
now you were talking about your books,
Yes.
the paranormal reality book series.
Hmm.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that. And I have the Facebook page there where they could find more of
Well, I have Sandra to thank for a lot of that. She pushes me, to
that.
write, and which these stories. Well, basically, see, we'd have our meetings, and after, we'd have our weekly meetings with Taps and Near, and we'd be telling stories, swapping stories. I'd have all these stories I'd tell and everything. Sandra said, "Well, why don't you write these down and put them into book form? That way, people have them ready at hand, and they'll be able to read them, and so that gets the word out." So that's
Hmm.
that's why I started the Paranormal Reality series, because they're all true stories, and based on actual phenomena. A lot of the stories are cases I've worked on with Sandra, and I think a lot of these stories are interesting because some of the earlier stories deal with the Atlantic Paranormal Society,
Hmm.
things we did before the TV show. See, I don't know if a lot of people realize that it's like a pre-civilization. Taps did exist quite a few years before the TV show,
Right.
and it just wasn't publicized like it is now. But it's not like we formed Near and the Atlantic Paranormal Society to be on TV. These groups existed before the TV shows, and so if you want to see what we were doing, running around during the weekends and coming home exhausted, and then getting up for work on Monday morning, this tells what was going on during that time. A lot of it. So.
Yes, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Mhm.
So, um, also, I heard that there is a documentary out there about the
Yes.
Harrisburg. Yes.
Yeah, there is a documentary about the Harrisville haunting. Yes, in Harrisville, Rhode Island. with the Perrin family, and a lot of people will recognize the name of Perrin, and Ed
Mhm.
and Lorraine Warren became involved, and that's how that big story came about. And that took place in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and started in the early 1970s. It
Mhm.
actually started when the Perrin family moved into an early 18th century farmhouse that was a beautiful, it needed some work, but it was a beautiful farmhouse. The former owner didn't want to leave. In fact, for a while, he was just staying there, helping them
Mhm.
move in, and he really didn't want to leave. Unfortunately, his wife had passed away, and he just could not deal with the whole house by himself. But the Perrin family moved in, and Roger and Carolyn Perrin and their 5 daughters of various ages. Somehow that seemed to really ignite the paranormal activity there. Not that there wasn't anything experienced beforehand, because the previous owner, Earl Kenyon, he was known throughout the community. That's the guy who leaves his lights on all night. He lives in a haunted house, and he leaves his lights on all night long. In fact, the week the parents moved in, he went for a walk with Roger, and he told Roger Perrin, Roger, do yourself and your family a favor, leave the lights on all night. Now,
Mhm.
Roger didn't know what that meant. I don't know if it meant that they might trip over something or what, but found out that a lot was going on in the house that really was really concentrated on his wife, Carolyn. And when it's a really deep, if you want to call it that, deep or heavy
Mhm.
haunting situation like that, it's more than things just going bump in the night and things moved around. That's usually how it starts. But there's usually a routine to this. It starts focusing on one person in particular, and
Mhm.
in this case, it was Carolyn. Now, the daughters, they used to see these spirits, beginning with the oldest one, Andrea,
Mhm.
down to the youngest, who was April. And Andrea was a teenager. April was about 5, 6 years old. And they started seeing these spirits. And some of the daughters thought, wow, we have friends over. Are these people staying here? I don't know who they are, because to them, they looked like regular people. They couldn't tell the
Right.
difference at first. And as you know, young people, children are very, very open. They're very innocent.
Yes.
They're very perceptive,
Mhm.
more so than adults are. We're actually we're actually trained in a way. We train ourselves to filter these things out. Society trains them.
Yeah.
Parents say, "Well, that was just your imagination. That'll go away." And in fact, in that house, at one time, there was a woman who ran a daycare center
Mhm.
with young children, and they were never harmed. They were never really frightened or harmed. It's just that once in a while, a child would say, "Who is that man? Who is that guy over there? He's dressed in funny clothes."
Mhm.
And the woman who was the proprietor at the time just said, "Oh, that's just somebody who's visiting me. He'll go away soon. He's just passing through," and then they disappear.
Mhm.
But the parent family lived there, and it was concentrated on Carolyn. And something didn't like Carolyn, almost like there was a competition going,
Huh.
competition for the affection of the children and her husband Roger. And she was kind of felt like she was in the way.
Mm.
And very, very disturbing things happened. First, it was items missing and moved around, but then it became more personalized. Like she was out in the barn, and a scythe just happened to fall off the wall, went spiraling, nearly decapitated her
Mm.
right by her head.
Mm.
She ducked quickly. Another time, she had just come out of the bathroom after bathing, and she went to what they called the warm room, the next room, to dry off.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, it was one of these wooden, not the plastic kind, but an old-fashioned wooden coat hanger.
Right.
Leapt off the rack, began wrapping her arms, wrapping her in the head. She put her arms up defenselessly. It just kept hitting her until it finally went clattering on the floor.
Mm.
And there happened to be a family friend over at the time and looked in and saw this, and the family friend never came back.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. So just a number of bizarre things. And so that's why she needed help. Carolyn
Mhm.
felt she needed help. And coincidentally, I maybe not so coincidentally, but my brother and I were teenagers at the time, and we were at Rhode Island College. We had an organization called PYRO, Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization, and that was run by our friend Donna Eisenstadt at the time, who was a college student there at Rhode Island College. And we met them through attending a lecture by Ed and Lorraine Warren at Rhode Island College, and that's when we were invited to join. We were not students there at the time, but we were invited to join because we had experience and were knowledgeable about paranormal phenomena at a time when you just, you talked around campfires and things like
Right.
that, Halloween stories. But we were invited to join, and that's how we became involved with that. Since there was no internet at the time, I just decided to put an ad in a local paper. I tried to word it carefully. We investigate things. I didn't use the word haunted. I just said things that are strange in your house that may be unexplained. We investigate them free of charge. And I thought, no, people are just going to laugh at this. But 3 weeks later to the day, it was answered by Carolyn Perrin. Would you please come and walk through our house and see what we're experiencing? And she told us her whole story. And so we did. And we experienced a lot there our first night. So we realized this was legit. These people weren't making it up.
Right.
And eventually we asked advice from Ed and Lorraine Warren when it got really terrible. Carolyn had an experience that of a woman, looks kind of like a woman, but it was more like a small monstrosity dressed as a woman, like a decaying corpse, was in a room chanting to her. And that's about all she could take. And so Carolyn had called us and said, I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do at this point. So Donna, our chairperson, called Ed and Lorraine Warren to ask for advice. Now, she hadn't invited them to participate. She just said, I need your advice. What would you do at this point? And of course, Ed and Lorraine said, well, we'll do more than give advice. We'll come down there and we'll assist you in your investigation. And that's how Ed and Lorraine became involved. And we were very pleased to have them on our side with all their years of experience. And in that house, I approached this from a Christian view, based on my faith. And I was upstairs with some of the younger daughters. They were telling me how afraid they were. I suggested try calling upon the name of Jesus, because they had told me they were Catholic. Right. Now, there was a window that could not be closed because of the August humidity. The 1736 wood was just too swollen. Roger had tried taking a hammer to it. It would not close. But the moment I said the name of Jesus, that window came slamming down. Tremendous force. One of the younger girls got slapped on the left side of her head. You see her hair go up, and she was screaming and crying. But I kept calling upon the name of Jesus, and it left the room. It didn't leave the house, but you could tell it left the room. Right. Suddenly, the air was still. Everything was calm and peaceful, and they all noticed it. So that's when I realized this probably isn't something very, very nice. I had suspected before then, but I'd actually accidentally used provocation and did get a result. Fortunately, we're all kept safe. But that stayed with us, that case, for quite some time. It's something that we'll never personally forget. And we got to work with Ed and Lorraine Warren, too, who were good friends with us at the time.
Now, so you went back a few times.
Yes, we did. And eventually a seance was held there. Now, I wasn't there at the time. If I was there, I certainly wouldn't have participated, because I don't personally participate in seances. But the Ed and Lorraine came one night with, they had some reporters to document in case anything happened. They wanted proof of this. They wanted solid proof that this does happen. Lorraine had a friend of hers who was also, of course, Lorraine was clairvoyant, and her friend was also very, very psychic. She was a psychic medium. So she began calling upon the spirit. And they also had a young priest there, a young Catholic priest, in case things went awry, which they did. Carolyn was placed in the center of the room, and she was the subject. If something was, since it was kind of focusing on her in a negative way, they figured that if it wanted to communicate, it would communicate through Carolyn. Well, it did. Carolyn suddenly hunched over and in an impossible position. It looked like a contortionist. And she began speaking in a very deep guttural voice. And this language, it didn't seem like any human language. Some people wondered if it was perhaps a Native American language, but it was totally undecipherable, the way she was muttering and speaking. And suddenly she let out a tremendous scream, and she was just jettisoned out of that chair, just jettisoned. and she was a very slim woman. She was very attractive, but losing a lot of weight and starting to age prematurely. So she impacted that floor very, very hard. Her head hit the floor.
Mm.
She looked like she was dead. I wasn't there, but from what I was told, Andrea, one of the eldest of the daughters, of course, was peeking through the doorway with one of her sisters. She saw her mother hit that floor and she thought she was dead.
Mm.
And Roger tried to revive her. And of course, Ed tried to intervene, said, "You shouldn't touch the possessed at this point." And he and Roger unfortunately got into a scuffle, and
Mm.
the Warrens had to leave. But Carolyn did come out of it and began breathing again. She was changed after that. She never truly got over that.
Right.
Now, the activity in the house did lessen a little bit for a while before coming back, but Carolyn was she had lifelong effects from that seance that night.
Mm. Well, I can imagine, even if nothing else, the fact that she experienced the speaking differently, the way she was,
Mm.
positioned and then thrown onto the floor.
Yes,
That in itself would definitely affect people for a long time.
yes,
Yeah.
and the poor young priest, they had brought him in, but he had never dealt with any because I mean, clergy, they're people too,
Right.
and he was there to control things in case it got out of hand. But I guess at that point he was like, "What do I do? What do I do?" But he was kind of at a loss for words at that point, and the reporters did document it. People were taking pictures and audio recordings.
Hmm.
What happened to that evidence? I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know, but it was not in our hands, and I don't know whatever happened to that.
Oh, that's a
But
shame
but
because I
that's
would.
kind of proof positive that these
Yeah,
things do happen.
exactly, exactly, and that's just one case.
Mm-hmm.
Many times in many cases don't go
Oh yeah,
reported.
yeah.
You
Oh
know.
yes. These things are happening all the time.
Mhm.
That's why I got into this field. I was a teenager.
Mhm.
I mean, I did approach it from a Christian point of view. At the beginning, obviously, I didn't know what I was doing, but
Mhm.
there was nobody to actually sit down and train me. This is what you expect, and this was going. Just read up on it. My brother Carl and I read up as much as possible,
Mhm.
and I went in with more of a religious approach than my brother did. But my brother did some provocation back then while he was experimenting with the paranormal, and he did get results. Our first ever EVP, electronic voice phenomena, was in our basement, and my brother was commenting on a picture that was it was very like a kind of a daughter of the devil, and my brother mentioned daughter of the devil, and suddenly there was a record. It was in slow motion. It was very eerie. Played the tape back. We weren't even asking questions, but played the recording back, and a voice in slow motion just started moaning. So a friend of ours sped the recording up, and it said, "Carl, help me, help."
Ooh.
Yeah. And of course, my brother began, and this is in our house where we grew up. My brother began seeing the silhouette of a woman floating by at night. He'd
Mhm.
wake up and see this, or he'd be walking around and he'd see that walk by. He thought it was me at first, but then he looked closer. No, this is kind of like a Victorian woman in silhouette form. And then one morning he hadn't gone to sleep yet, being the insomniac he is, and he happened to look over, turned over in his bed, and there was a woman standing right there. Now she was full
Wow.
color, wearing a Victorian gray dress, her hair done up in a bun. Just she wasn't very old, but she was looking at him very severely, like
Mm.
she was displeased. And then she just faded from view. First thing he thought is, nobody's going to believe me. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I would think that too. It's like, so what other experiences, if any, did you have in the house?
We had the sound of what sound, and this we didn't know at the time, but this has been reported by other people who are having serious phenomena going on in their house. When it's really getting bad, there'll be certain signs that will happen. And
Mm-hmm.
one of these signs was one night, it was in the middle of the night, it sounded like somebody was on the roof. except it wasn't just the sound of somebody walking on the roof. These were heavy, pounding footsteps trotting, like almost
Mm,
like a giant on the roof.
mm,
And that we found out that had been reported by other people, including cases that the Warrens had worked on. That sounded like a giant lumbering across the roof, and of course nobody was there.
mm,
One time it was a riding. It looked like a woman's like driving glove or riding glove in the middle of the hallway, very antiquated. And my brother and sister said, "Where did that come from?" And they looked around again; it was gone.
mm,
So items appearing and disappearing like that. And of course, my brother, I didn't do it as much, but my brother and sister, when they were in their mid-teens, they tried communicating with it. And of course, they used an Ouija board,
mm,
and it spelled out Sylvia. Sylvia on the planchette spelled out the letters to Sylvia.
mhm,
And they asked, "Well, Sylvia, where are you?" And she spelled out cellar, Cellar. That's why they went to the cellar and waited for a sign. They waited several minutes. And they got bored. They started going up, and all of a sudden there was three percussive poundings on the wall.
mm.
So that was kind of a telltale sign that something was there. It really was. And here and there, I remember we were just chatting in the dining room. My sister suddenly got shoved from behind. Things like that. And you know, playing with divination devices it can get very hairy, can get kind of dangerous.
Yes.
It got to you've experienced that where
Mhm.
suddenly there's a spirit that starts saying, it's not going to tell you when you're going to get married and things along that. It's going to tell you, your family members are going to die, they're going to be in an accident, things like that. We started getting messages like that, and then it just wouldn't communicate. And
Mm,
as you know, the planchette itself is very, very light. It's usually
right.
made of plastic or balsa wood. It's very, very light, so you can push it. They could not push that with all their strength. They tried pushing that, and it would not move, almost like it was magnetized, like it was glued to the board, which it
Mm,
wasn't.
mm,
And so there's actually about our experiences in the house using that. There's an episode of a haunting where you can see that. It's they did an episode on what we'd experienced when we were teenagers growing up, and it's called appropriately. The episode is titled "Dangerous Games."
mhm.
Yeah,
Very, very
very dangerous. Yeah,
appropriate.
it does show. I mean, obviously, this doesn't happen every time somebody uses a board or a communication device. And I think personally, most of the time, it's someone's subconscious. And you're asking a question and you're answering it. You're
Mhm,
answering it yourself subconsciously. But sometimes it only takes that once for an entity to take that as an invitation and wants to be invited in. It
mhm.
has to have permission. And even if there's a spirit already there, sometimes it needs the invitation to take it the next step and
Right,
go further to infiltrate with the family involved or the individual involved.
right.
And sometimes people, this could be someone who's depressed and lonely, like a lonely teenager, even somebody who's suicidal, and they look for a friend. And like in
Mhm.
The Exorcist, the fictional, of course, that was based on a true account
Right.
of possession that happened. But in the story by William Peter Blatty, the fictional character of Reagan, her mother's a famous actress, so they move from town to town. She never gets any real long lasting friendships.
Mhm.
And her father, the parents are separated. Her father doesn't even call her on her birthday because he's out in the Caribbean with his girlfriend and everything.
Mhm.
So she turns to her father's name is Howard. So she's got a personal friend called Howie, Captain Howdy.
Mhm.
And so Captain Howdy answers her questions for her. And that's how the spirit is able to come in. It's invited by an innocent child,
Right.
but sometimes this happens. They don't play fair. They don't. There's
No.
no rule book where they're going to play fair. See, so they'll
Uh,
pick on somebody who's lonely or depressed sometimes.
right. And they feed off that negativity
Oh
that
yes,
person is
yes,
is experiencing at that moment. So it gives them even
yes,
more power to come
yes.
through there and stay. Because
Mm-hmm.
first you already gave them permission, you opened the
Mm-hmm.
door, and here they're feeding off that negative feelings. So
Yes.
unfortunately, that's how it works.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, anybody could open a portal at any point. Let's face it, with
It's
intention.
easier than people think. It's
Right,
easier than people think.
right. It's just you have to remember that not always Uncle Joe or Aunt Harriet or the good mother or anybody that
Right.
you want
Well, like
comes through.
we like to say, dead Uncle Fred. You know.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right. So, and so from your house and the Warrens, what other experiences can you speak about?
Oh, there's quite a few. I had a friend, my friend Jay Bryant was we were best friends in high school throughout our school years, and he was actually one of the people in Pyro that joined Pyro that came to the house with us in Harrisville. But his house had some bizarre phenomena too. His house was over 200 years old,
Mm,
and so there was a lot of time. Our house in Situate, where we grew up, Situate, Rhode Island, was new. It was built for our family, present from my grandfather, God
right.
bless him. And, but that was a new house. It was a pony corral before then, but I suspect because he lived next door in an older house, a much older house, was over 200 years old, and they had a
Mm,
200-year-old barn. I think it was something that was from there. It was called in through there because my mom, when she was a teenager, would play with the board and things like that. Communicate. It was just a teenage game you did, but yeah, I think it was something attracted from over there that we had this phenomena. Like when I was very young, voices outside the window,
mhm,
um, and that running around, laughter, bizarre laughter, and unmistakably a woman's voice. I used to you hear these, even though it seemed like it was talking backwards. I really couldn't understand it, but it was definitely a woman's voice, and I was wide awake. And happened again. It happened when I was 5 years old, but it started happening again when I was 15. So and a lot of things. And also, when I was very young, I was in a house, abandoned house in Little Compton. I was exploring, and my friend John Zaffis, who had similar experiences. He's
mhm.
uh, Ed Warren's blood nephew, of course,
Right.
and he
I,
has his own
I know.
demonology group. Yes, and he began exploring a house in Stratford, Connecticut, that was known for its poltergeist activity.
Mm,
In the 18th century, the Victorian era, the 17th. I mean, the 19th century actually. It was that's when it this house in Stratford had most of its phenomena,
mm,
and the Stratford House, as they called it. And he used to explore that when it was abandoned. And one time he heard something crawling on the ceiling, and he just ran out of there. It might have been squirrels, but he said he didn't know what it was. I went in this house in Little Compton, Rhode Island, and I had this inclination to peer into a room before I left, and there was a rocking chair just really rapidly
mm.
going back and forth like that by itself. So okay, I'm out of here. I did experience it. Unfortunately, that was like I was very very young, and that's before we began bringing tape recorders and cameras with us, equipment to actually take evidence of this. So many things. If we still had, pictures get lost, recordings get lost over the time. Just such valuable evidence that always winds up being lost.
Mhm,
Even Ed and Lorraine, they, when they were still living, they went on a vacation, and somehow the toilet flushed itself and it
mm,
wouldn't stop, and there was just gushed water all over the house when they were away for a week, and lost years and years and years of pictures, recordings, evidence, because Ed used to bring his tape recorder, his old reel-to-reel tape recorder, wherever he went, and he just had so many interviews on that. Some still exist,
right.
priceless interviews and the like. There was one case that we worked on, and Sandra was with us this time too. It was in East Providence, and some years ago, this woman, actually, it wasn't a woman, it was the mother of the household, had contacted one of our members of the
Mhm,
Atlantic Paranormal Society, and her daughter had raps. Her Uncle Frank had just died, her Uncle Frankie, and they thought it was him because she could talk to him and get a series of knocks.
mhm,
Whenever she asked him a question, they'd get a series of knocks, yes or no, and other things. And this girl, the 14-year-old daughter, was rather unpopular in school. She was kind of shy and quiet. She was made fun of. However, this started happening in school. They could hear the knockings.
Mm.
Suddenly, people were afraid of her, and she had the respect that she craved. People were now afraid of her, and they didn't dare make fun of her or start trouble with her. And it was happening at home with Uncle Frank. And we went through a session where some of our members of TAPS, were asking questions, and they got a pretty good rapport with Uncle Frankie, supposedly Uncle Frankie. And Uncle Frankie liked the pretty girls and liked good food and things like that when he was alive. And I happened to I pose a question: does Uncle Frankie see angels where he is?
Mm.
Suddenly it stopped. It
Mm.
wouldn't answer that question. I said,
Mm.
Frankie's on the other side. Do you see angels? And that wouldn't be answered. It wouldn't be answered. And they kept, Frank, he wouldn't answer. And then one of our members said, "Oh, never mind angels. You want to see pretty girls, right, Frank?" And it started up again, of course, But for some reason, and I've seen this before, when it's a rapping session like that,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it will not answer anything to do with religion. You sometimes can't ask about, say, is my mother in heaven? It will not answer. Do you
Mm.
see angels? It will not answer. Do you see Jesus where you are? You're on the other side. Just won't answer. You can ask, do you see like Aunt Tilly, or do you see your brother? You can see things, but it kind of hesitates when you try to talk about seeing other people. Usually it has to be a one-on-one conversation for whatever reason. And that seems to be the rule.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we've seen people being attacked, people being very, very, very upset by this, and I kind of put myself in their place when I first got into this field. And it's not that our haunting in our family's house was that horrendous. Yes, it did get very scary after a while, and it
Right.
became very, very negative. But it wasn't constant. It wasn't constant. Like the Perrin family,
Right.
they went through their experience in that house for almost a decade,
Mm-hmm.
almost just about 10 years. They went through that. Now that's a very, very long duration for a family to live with that. Like not 28 days like the Lutzes and Amityville. They went through this for a decade, and still after they left, it did still follow the mother, and Andrea deals with it sometimes, and some of the
Mm-hmm.
daughters. And I'm still in touch with them. And yes, sometimes they still do experience this phenomena, even though the families live in Georgia and in Florida. So
Yes. Yes.
sometimes it just my brother too. It seemed to have followed him. I've had things follow me as well. Fortunately, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't been attacked. By the grace of God, I have not been attacked, but I've had things certainly follow me, and I can tell that because sometimes when you're doing a recording, and it will just it seems to be required that you're in a spiritual atmosphere. You're either on an investigation or
Mm-hmm.
you're in a church or something. There has to be the spiritual element, the spiritual energy for it to communicate.
Mm.
But that's how I learned that something was still communicating with me. And my brother did still experience the three knocks. I experienced that once where I live now, but it was on the outside. Fortunately, it wasn't the inside. But my brother has experienced that on the inside of where he lived at the time.
Right. Well, that's one of the things that uh, I always tell people, because I try to counsel and guide and
Yes.
be a mentor to people. If you do this kind of stuff, please protect yourself before, say your prayers, whatever they are to you, because each one of us
Yes.
has a different belief system.
Uh-huh.
So whatever resonates with you, and then when you leave, also,
Yes.
so they stay there. They don't come back with you.
Good point.
And,
Good point. We always try to do that. We
right.
always try to remember to do that once we've been on an investigation or an intervention.
Mhm.
And of course, every intervention is an investigation because
Yes.
you often do get phenomena. Yeah, we do. That's a good point. We do that. Say prayers that nothing be allowed to follow us,
Hmm.
only that which is angelic, holy, and of the light.
Hmm.
Nothing negative be allowed to follow us. And I remember I was not participating, but I was at a tour. It was like a haunted tour where at Slater Mill, actually in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, one of
Hmm.
the houses, the Brown House, very old, historic, beautiful history to it. But some people were conducting a board session, and a Ouija board session, and they were doing it for some time. Then they just got up and left. And I said, not that I condone,
Right.
the divination, but please, by all means, be polite and say thank you and end the session. End the session politely.
And close the portal.
Yes, close the portal by all means. All means. Years ago in the 1980s, I had a friend. My friend Maggie was she was like a magnet. She was like a spirit magnet. She was very, very sensitive. She couldn't control it, though. She couldn't control it. One time she was with her friend Debbie, and they tried a communication session for a spirit of a young girl who passed away in Situate, Rhode Island. And they lit a candle and tried to talk to her. And the candle really started to glow very, very, very brightly. They figured they'd made communication. And then at the end, they just blew the candle out and stopped. And then they heard something outside the window. They looked outside. They didn't see anybody. So they came outside and they saw a man's footprints right outside the window. And they looked, and there's another set of footprints just forming while they're looking.
Wow.
So they went right back inside, relit the candle, did the closure, the proper closure. Thank you so much. Please, any portals be closed, and blew out the candle. And that seemed to stop the problem. So,
Well, that's exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's a proof positive that it's at least be respectful and close whatever you've done. Like the famous saying, "One door closes, another opens." Well, that can be true in the spirit world as well, of course.
Very true, very true. Because you never know what decides to take that opportunity and come in.
Let me ask: you've had something really negative follow you after you've done an intervention for somebody, like it seemed to resent and it latched on to you? Did you ever?
One time only.
One time only.
And that was enough for me to realize that I needed to do a lot more than just thank you very much, have a nice day, and leave. I actually have my own spray that I spray all around me. That's more than just sage and Palo Santo. It's something that's from the family recipe, as you could say.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah, and I also, when I do make that spray, I bless it, and I actually start with holy water. So by the time that I use it, it's been almost through every single type of holy thing that can be done to create a calmness, and so they understand that I'm not the passenger, I'm not the taxi.
Right. That's a good point. That you can bless your own items.
Yes.
I myself, I prefer if I can get a member of the clergy to do it. That's wonderful. Right. But that's not always available. So that's a good point. That you can bless your own water or objects, whatever, and you can do that because clergy is just, frankly, not available a lot of times. Yeah.
Right. I mean, yes, I am a ordained minister, but
yes, right.
I always try to go the extra step because it's just safety. Why would I want something to come back with me that doesn't belong to me?
Right. And I'm a minister too, but before I still prayed when there was nobody, else around. I would pray, may this be used in your service, these elements. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, whole ritual, but just simple, sincere prayer.
Something that comes from the heart and and something that resonates with you. That's the key. Because everybody says, "Oh, I give me something to say." I'm like, well, what resonates with you? If it's even just the Lord's Prayer, or just say that. It's okay.
Exactly.
You don't have to have a written script for everything.
That is true. That is true. You don't have to have a written script for everything. There was we've all had to improvise at times, depending on what's called for in the situation at the moment.
Right.
There was a time that Sandra and I were doing a blessing. We had been asked to come in for a woman who she was not Christian. She was actually pagan, but she was having a disturbance in her house. There was negativity there. There was a young man who had committed suicide. He did not die in the house, but he had lived there shortly before. and there was a lot of negative energy. When she mentioned his name, as soon as she mentioned the name, I began feeling very, very nauseous suddenly. And I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to disturb anybody. But Sandra felt the same way at the same time. She didn't. I didn't know that till she told me afterwards. She said I was afraid to say anything. She almost had to run to the bathroom. But
Mhm.
we did a very successful blessing in her house because we were down in the basement. Smelled kind of like rotten apples down
Oh,
there. Very,
yeah.
very pungent. That smell, and you get
Oh,
winter
uh-huh.
time, and after the fall, and things so bad. But we were blessing that place down there, and the way I worded it was very, very conducive to the homeowner because I
Mhm.
talked about the renewal of life, of
Mhm.
rebirth, and anything positive energy, trees blossoming, flowers blossoming. I worded it like that, which was very, very conducive
Right.
to the client who was pagan. And lo and behold, suddenly the room smelled like roses, like blossoming roses. And
Exactly.
the negative energy had been, I guess you could say, nullified, pushed out. But we don't just nullify it. We ask for positive energy to come in to take the place of the negative, just, not to leave a vacuum there as well.
Right, because once you leave that vacuum, anything could come in.
Oh yes, yes, knock, knock, knock again. Yes,
Right, exactly.
that's even biblical because
Mhm.
Jesus said when an evil spirit goes out of a man, it wanders through dry places seeking rest and finding none. So
Mhm.
it says, "I will return to the home in which I inhabited," and meaning a person as
Right.
well as a house, meaning a person, and finding it well swept and cleaned out. So I will take several more spirits wickeder than myself with me this time, so
Mhm.
you won't be cast out again. And the estate of that person is worse than before.
Right.
So it's always recommend anything that's cast out. You have to pray or speak about positive energy,
Mhm.
as positive as you possibly can be.
Mhm. Well, I believe that that word prayer is such a universal
Hmm.
word. A lot of people just think it's has to do with religion. No, it could be anything.
Hmm.
A prayer is a ritual, a meditation, an intention.
Yes.
It's just like writing the old
Yeah.
good old Santa letters. Dear Santa, I want this. This is
Yes.
basically the same thing.
Yeah, exactly, like the archaic English, prithee.
Right.
I pray thee. I pray that you will do this. I ask
Right.
that you request that you will do this. Yes.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So tell us a little more. We're coming close to the end here. Tell us more about that Warren Convention, because
Oh yes. Yeah.
I'm wrong weekend. You got to change the weekend this year. No.
I know. I know. It's always October is such a busy month, and I know
Mhm.
most people have the typical June wedding, like I did, Sandra and I did, but a lot of people do a lot of things around this time of year as well.
Yes.
Um, I mean, the weather is usually nice. It can be rainy or cool, but it's not really the winter weather yet. So a lot of people do the nice fall ceremonies at this time of year.
Yes.
So it's a very, very busy time. But it is the Warren's Seekers of the Supernatural Phantasma Con,
Mhm.
and it is going on this weekend. Friday is the VIP party where you'll get to meet and greet a lot of people. And I believe my friend Ryan, he was there last year, past couple of years. I believe he'll be there this year, um, because the list is, the list keeps getting added onto. So I believe that Ryan may be there as well. He dealt with a situation where a woman was addicted to the Ouija board. So
Oh.
she wasn't eating, she wasn't bothering her family. She actually went to this obsession where this is what she did morning till night. So fortunately, he was able to do an intervention, and a lot of it was psychological too. She becomes so psychologically and emotionally, like people do with social media these
Right.
days. See,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get to meet and greet him, that's wonderful. A lot of interesting people. Like I said, our friend Jason Hawes will be there, founder of the Atlantic Paranormal Society and star of Ghost Hunters, and Steve Gonzalez will be there, and just so many people. It's been added onto, I'm sure, since the last time I checked, because it
Mm-hmm.
changes daily. Tony Spera and Dan Rivera, of course, and Tony, of course, has mentioned He is the son-in-law of Ed and
Mhm.
Lorraine Warren, and he's married to Judy Warren,
Okay.
who's of course Ed and Lorraine's daughter,
Mhm.
and she grew up with a lot of this, hearing about it, and actually, because they had their haunted museum right in their house, connected to their house,
Right.
right next to their house, and that's a lot of the artifacts. Of course, the museum is no longer open, but Tony is in charge of these items,
Mhm.
and you'll get to see. And it's $35 for admission. It's a separate price if you want to see the artifacts during
Right.
the convention in the daytime.
Mhm.
But the Annabelle will be there, the famous Annabelle
Ooh.
Higgins doll,
Okay.
which is famous from the movies, of course, the Conjuring franchise.
Mhm.
The But the real Annabelle that started it all, the real one, will be there behind glass, of course. You
Right.
can't touch her. Don't recommend touching any of these items because your aura could mingle with that. And if you're very
Mhm.
sensitive, I've seen people very, very sensitive, and they don't realize that this will happen, and
Mhm.
before they know it, they have an attachment they didn't want.
Yep.
Hitchhikers call them in the field.
Uh-huh.
Hitchhikers. And Annabelle will be there. A lot of haunted houses, like a satanic statue that was found in the woods, and became part of the museum, and there was repercussions from that. These items have to be blessed regularly. They have to
Yes.
be blessed. And there's, even if you go on Tony Sparrow's YouTube,
Mhm.
you'll see that when Dan Rivera, when they had to change Annabelle to a new case, there was a whole ritual that went along with that,
Mhm.
blessing and prayers that nothing be attached, wearing gloves and everything. And there's a skull that had been used in satanic ceremonies,
Mhm.
and that's going to be there, the actual skull, and it's got the little pentagram on the forehead, glow in the dark pentagram that was somebody stuck on there. Not a pentacle, but a pentagram that's turned around, and
Turn
that
it
was
upside down with the pointing down.
right.
Right.
Exactly. That was actually used in rituals. That's going to be there. Oh, and a haunted. Just some of it's very disturbing, like
Mhm.
it looks like I don't want to say witch. It's more like an old hag
Mhm.
uh, doll that's been made. It has a human tooth in it,
Mhm.
real human hair.
Mhm.
And what dark practitioners used to do, they used to take a picture of it, and the regular Polaroid, send it to somebody they wanted to be cursed, and they'd open it up. There's the picture. You've been cursed, and
Mhm.
that's I mean, just the thought of that, even even psychologically, what that can do to somebody,
Yeah.
terrible, frighten somebody badly. That's what that was used for. A conjuring mirror. There was a conjuring mirror where somebody had a conjuring mirror, which mirror magic has been around for a long time. Mirror,
Mhm.
mirror on the wall,
Right.
and he was doing spells to get advantage money and advantage, curse people he didn't like.
Wow.
One day he must have done something wrong because it turned on him. A
Mm.
demonic entity from the mirror turned on him and began attacking him, and that's when he got in touch with the Warrens. Please help me! There's a maniac. There's a maniac I can't see set loose in my house. Please help me! So see how dangerous these things
Yeah.
are, and
It's-
obviously you can't touch them. I wouldn't want to touch them myself. Wouldn't want to handle them. I've been around this field for a long, long time. I have removed items that do have attachments, but I always
Mhm.
do very prayerfully and very carefully.
Yes.
And I usually don't keep them in my house. I give them to donate them to friends who have museums of their own where they collect haunted objects very safely,
Right.
like John Zaffis does and
Mhm.
such. And my friends Cody and Satori, who will be there, um,
Good.
they because Satori is Jason Hawes' daughter, and Cody, they're very good friends of mine. I've known Satori since she was literally 2 weeks old. Her little bed there. She'd just come home from the hospital,
Oh,
and her and her boyfriend Cody have their own haunted museum traveling exhibit. They bring with them. They go
ooh.
all over the country with it. And
Well, we're definitely running out of time, so I want to thank you. Please
you're
do come
welcome.
back again and stay for a second. I want to thank everyone who was here. Many blessings. And as always, we all love you. Bye.
Bye.